All right, next up we have Ravenous Pterrordax. This is a card that may go in a similar deck to the Runt. I could easily see the Runt, by the way, fitting into like Zoo, where you're looking to just swarm your opponent, and even just like a marginally better stat line for your minion is valuable. It looks like we're gonna have two sort of divergent paths for what like a Zoo style deck would look like. There's clearly the very discard heavy style of Zoo deck that's looking to play maybe the Quest, definitely playing like the Clutch Master, Clutch Mistress, whatever she is. She's super clutch though, because you got a clutch discard with her. But this is a card that can go into like a deck that has like Possessed Villager or the Forbidden Ritual, things that are just looking to make lots of things on the board. And this potentially is in the same deck as Runt if you're doing that kind of swarm style of strategy. But adapt. Battlecry, destroy friendly minion to adapt twice. This can be really powerful in terms of both like an offensive tool, like if you get Wind Fury +1/+1 or Wind Fury Stealth or Stealth +3 attack, it can just hit really hard. It can also be a reasonable defensive card. And there's obviously other cards that work well with it too. Like we haven't gotten to it with the Devil's or Egg that was revealed. Very similar to the power of Nerubian Egg plus Power Overwhelming, in order to actually get you this extra boost from your sacrifice cards. So I think this could be a strong card in that style of deck. As to whether the Swarm version seems like it's likely to be as powerful as the discard version is much less clear to me. And in particular in a world where Maelstrom Portal still exists, it's not clear how good Shaman will be, so it's not clear how many Maelstrom Portals will exist. But if they do, I would expect the discard version to be stronger. But if they don't, maybe the Swarm version, which would include this card almost certainly, would be the way to go. All right, next up we have Bloodbloom, which is a 2-cost Warlock spell. Your next spell costs health instead of mana. So we've seen this effect on a number of different Warlock cards. This is the cheapest version of this we've seen, though. So being able to pay 2 mana to potentially discount a spell by a lot of life could be very powerful, especially if there are proactive spells. Like, for instance, if Warlock has a 6-cost spell that makes stuff somehow, like Karakazam, let's say. Bloodbloom into Karakazam, you're getting a pretty significant board presence for just 2 mana and 5 life against some decks. Maybe there's something like that that could be worth it at some point. I'm not really feeling like it's very likely to be a powerful card. We've seen Cho'Gall have the same effect. The biggest thing is that Warlock spells don't tend to be things that you really want to accelerate out. Like a card like Twisting Nether or a card like Doom, these are cards that you generally want to wait until late in the game to play them, so accelerating them out with Bloodbloom or accelerating them out with Cho'Gall, obviously Cho'Gall, pretty bad to accelerate out a Doom or Twisting Nether because he kills himself too. But it could be interesting with like Violet Illusionist or Mal'Ganis in Wild to allow you to pay the health cost and not actually lose life. So maybe we see some synergies with that showing up, just allowing people to play their spells cheaper. Warlock, because it does have life tap, can afford to spend cards on something like this because you can life tap and just get additional resources that other classes don't necessarily have access to, and then you're just using your life total as a resource to try to accelerate things out, and that can be a powerful thing with the right spells. But the question is whether Warlock has the right spells to care about this, and I don't think the answer is yes right now. Next up we have Chittering Tunneler. With Battlecry, discover a spell, deal damage to your hero equal to its cost. So another, my blood for spells kind of card. Though in this case, it's drawing you the card rather than casting it. So Warlock is in a place where it can draw cards via its life total pretty naturally. So it's unclear necessarily what huge value you're getting from Chittering Tunneler, especially given that it's a beast, not a demon. So you're not really getting any sort of synergies with a lot of the other cards in the class. It's kind of a more efficient version of Ivory Knight, but going backwards. Ivory Knight gives you the heal. This is a 3/3 for 3, which is much more efficiently costed than Ivory Knight, but it costs you life instead. I'm not totally sold on it. It feels like you have enough tools for card advantage naturally in Warlock that you don't need this, and that you are more likely to want to play sort of for tempo and use your life total in other ways, just life tapping or whatever else. So not really a card that I'm seeing having a particularly strong home, but it does have a lot of flexibility, because it allows you to decide, what spell you want from the Tunneler based on the matchup and the situation and everything. So maybe it's good enough, but 3/3 for 3 is hard to justify in most decks. This card, though, I can definitely see justifying into into playing in a number of decks. There's a lot of powerful discard synergies that exist so far in Warlock, and this is another way to take advantage of those discarded cards. It's a 6-cost 5/5 with Death Rattle. Summon a random minion you discarded this game. It's kind of like a Faceless Summoner, except it is sort of a much wider range. Because maybe it gets you the Doomguard you so sadly had to discard. Maybe it gets you some other large minion, but also maybe it just gets you something relatively small. But generally, Faceless Summoner got you something pretty small. I think this is a powerful card. I think this is likely to be the sort of card that may end up being like the top end of a mid-rangey discard Warlock deck. We see the Lakari Fellhound or whatever it is. That's a defensively oriented discard card. And if you're playing like with that and Doomguard, one of them discards the other, you get to Cruel Dinomancer one of them back. You could even play a deck that is actually like not terribly minion heavy, and is looking to control the fact that it has only relatively powerful things to discard, and so you're guaranteed to get something reasonable back with Cruel Dinomancer. And that's really strong. Like if your only minions are like the discard synergy minions, and then you have like spells like Soulfire and I don't know, Hellfires and stuff. You're playing like a longer game mid-range style of deck that's mostly planning on winning with the quest. You're guaranteed to get something pretty high impact back from this, and that can be really strong. It is worth noting how this interacts with Clutch Mother. I don't know how it interacts with Clutch Mother, whether it can put it back into play off the Cruel Dinomancer, or if the fact that it went back to your hand means it doesn't count as discarded. If it can resummon Clutch Mother, and you get like multiple Clutch Mothers somehow, like that could be really, really busted, because Clutch Mother can get huge every time you discard it. So how that interaction works is unclear to me, because, well, these cards aren't out yet, but could be really, really powerful to make that even better. So here we have Feeding Time. It's basically a worse Implosion. It's like an Implosion that's guaranteed to high roll. A lot of what was powerful about Implosion was how strong the tempo was at the stage of the game, given that you had 4 mana. But if you are playing like a Swarm-based Warlock deck, which, as we discussed before, is likely to be one of the sort of major archetypes, I think, of Warlock that's available, that and Discard. I think this might be a strong card in that, because yes, 3 damage isn't necessarily that much for 5 mana, but always being guaranteed to get the 3 roll on Implosion. You were looking for 2 from Implosion, basically. That was what you could actually rely on, and get, being able to guarantee to get 3 makes this more reliable to actually be filling your board, which is some of what you want in that style of deck, and also is not requiring you to sit there and like roll the dice and pray to actually kill your opponent's minions. So not a staple card like Implosion was, but I think potentially a strong card in decks that are looking to flood. Next up we have Tar Lurker. It's a little weird to me that this is another Tar elemental thing. We saw the Tar Lord, who is in Warrior, and then there's the Tar Lurker, who's in Warlock. I guess like Warlock also has like a, I don't know, taunt thing going on. This is a very powerful defensive minion that you can play in a control Warlock deck. A 4/7 taunt for 5 on your opponent's turn is super, super good at bridging you to the later turns of the game. If you're looking to build to, whether it's crazy Medivh Doom stuff like Toast likes to do or whatever else. Maybe you're still playing, trying to play a Kazakus Warlock strategy. And, because you don't have Reno, you need even better ways to keep you alive and keep your life up in the middle turns, and Tar Lurker can definitely help. So I think this is a very strong card if you are, again, playing to try to survive to the late turns of the game and just defend yourself. But it's not clear that that's going to be an effective Warlock strategy without Reno around, so we'll have to see. All right, next up we have the Mage Quest, which is one of the craziest cards in the new expansion, which is Open the Waygate, with the craziest, definitely the craziest of the actual requirements, which is cast 6 spells that didn't start in your deck. So, first of all, you have to get 6 spells from outside the game into your hand, with things like Babbling Book or Kabbalist's Tome, or a couple of the new spells that we, or cards in the Ongoro expansion that we're going to get to eventually, but that's like stage 1, is just get them into your hand, and then you also have to cast them. So this is, a really, really high demand in terms of actually completing the quest. And once you do complete the quest, you get this. I couldn't actually find the Hearthstone image, but this is actually exactly what you get, which is a magic card, Time Warp, with you take an extra turn after this one, and it costs 5 mana, so it actually works out perfectly. So I just thought it was really funny that it was, just literally Time Warp, 5-cost card, take an extra turn, literally the same card, which is kind of, a like, let's do the Time Warp again kind of thing, which is literally also the flavor text on Time Warp, let's do it again, by Squee, Goblin Cabin Hand. But regardless, This is like, really, really wacky quest, really cool reward that is the kind of thing it's like, what crazy stuff can I do with this? And I love that, stuff like this is, exist in Hearthstone, because one of the things about Hearthstone that is kind of problematic is that it's just a super linear game. Naturally, Hearthstone is a game where, I play a minion that it can attack into your minion. We always get a mana per turn. We always draw a card from your deck. We have a ton of control over what our hand looks like in any given game because of the mulligan rules. And there's a hero powers all the time. But this is the sort of thing that not only encourages someone to play tons of stuff that creates massive gameplay variance in terms of adding cards to your deck from outside the game, but also just makes you your head explode trying to figure out, okay, well, then I get a card that costs 5 that lets me take an extra turn. What do I do with that? I think the obvious example is you just play Arcane Giants because you're playing a ton of spells in this deck. You play some Arcane Giants and then just take an extra turn and attack your opponent for tons of damage, which is a pretty straightforward and awesome thing to do with an extra turn. But, that's just not the only thing, because you could do whatever. You could, set up some other combo with this that then does, other powerful things. I think most of what we'll see for people trying to do this quest, initially at least, will be the Arcane Giant Smash You plan. But this seems like the sort of deck that's going to want to include, Yogg-Saron and all sorts of stuff like that, too. So definitely the style of deck that I may not necessarily gravitate to naturally is combo and one-turn kill type stuff, but I feel like there's enough crazy stuff going on with this and enough of an excuse to put Yogg in my deck, even after the change, that this will definitely be something that I explore come Ungoro time. Next up, we have Meteor, which I love the fact that they explicitly made sure that Meteor would wipe out any dinosaur, that 15 damage was enough to kill whatever dinosaur it was. Tyrannosus, though, he can't be targeted by spells, so you cannot Meteor him, so he will survive the end of all the dinosaurs and live on by himself a lonely dinosaur life as the only dinosaur. Anyway, this is, a more powerful explosive shot, which is weird because it feels like that was kind of a Hunter thing, was the area effect style damage done in that way rather than a Mage thing, which is kind of area effect all your opponent's stuff. I think it's a powerful card. I think this is a good way to remove a individual big minion that can be difficult for Mage, especially with Kazakis still in the format, even though Reno's gone. Having access to something like this that can sort of back up your polymorph as another way to kill something huge could be a powerful tool for that style of deck. Or even just a control Mage deck in general, being able to blow up one big thing and have pseudo AoE to kill a lot of the other stuff can be really, really good. A lot of times when you play Blizzard, for instance, you just wanted to do a couple damage to a few things. Yes, a lot of cases you want the full freeze effect to really slow down the game. But with Meteor, it's sometimes it's there's a big thing and a couple small things, and I just want to wipe them all out. And this can do it. So I think this is a card that definitely has constructed level viability. We have Molten Reflection. This is a weird card. This is kind of like an Echo of Medivh card where it's okay, what do you do with this? This is choose a friendly minion, summon a copy of it. So it's kind of like a Faceless Manipulator, but costs 1 less. And, you can... I don't really know what else really matters with it. What makes it different. It's basically just a better Faceless Manipulator. It is a spell, so it goes into a spell-heavy deck. You can reduce the cost of it. You can't reduce the cost of Faceless Manipulator in the same way. This can potentially enable you to more easily get a bunch of Sorcerer's Apprentices to go infinite with Archmage Antonidas. You could even go Antonidas, coin out Molten Reflection on Antonidas, and you're just totally going off. But I love this. This is just a card that is... it's also a spell that you can get off of Kabbalist's Tome or Babbling Book or any of the random effects. That is another way that you can gain actual board value from spells, which is a really important thing sometimes in control Mage decks that especially if you're going to be digging with stuff like Kabbalist's Tome, you need to find something that does something, and this can be very high impact because you can actually copy your stuff. Actually, one thing that you can do with it for sure, which is kind of awesome, is make 1,000,000 Arcane Giants. If you have 2 of these in your deck that's looking to Time Warp, you just Arcane Giant, Molten Reflection, Time Walk, kill you. There you go. There's your combo. Next up we have Primordial Glyph, which is Discover Spell, reduces cost by 2. So this is a weird card because you're getting Discover Spell, which can be pretty powerful in terms of just the versatility you're gaining. It obviously costs you 2 mana, but you're reducing the cost by 2. There are a lot of spells. I assume this is only Mage spells, by the way, because that's how Discover effects work. You only select from your class as a basis. But if you did somehow get this card when you were not playing Mage, you discover a spell from your own class, because it doesn't say discover a Mage spell like Kabbalist's Tome. Because Kabbalist's Tome is random cards, so that's why it has to specify Mage. This is obviously a powerful card with the Mage quest. It's obviously very powerful with Arcane Giant or any other cards that care about spells. You can potentially get a sort of chain of spells going with Primordial Glyph. You could potentially get glyph into 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 glyph, and just play your Arcane Giants out in turn 2, and you just, you've also just gotten your quest off, then you just, time warp and your opponent dies. It also works very well with like Antonidas, for instance, because if you discover a cheap spell, or even like a 3-cost spell, a 4-cost spell, you can pair it alongside Antonidas. Like Antonidas into cheap spell, you just kind of go off potentially. So there's just a lot of powerful things that Primordial Glyph can do if you're looking to play that style of mage deck. Definitely excited for this card. Certainly a cool highlight reel card in addition to potentially a strong toolbox card for control mages. So here we have Shimmering Tempest, which is a 2/1 for 2 with Death Rattle. Put a random mage spell in your hand. So this is kind of like the Babbling Book curve. Turn 1, you play Babbling Book. Turn 2, you play this. And just get them. It's kind of weird. I think the Babbling Book is a better version for a number of reasons. 1, it costs 1 mana. 2, it's a battle cry, so you get it immediately. And 3, it already has memes associated with it, including Pavel, the world champion. So those all taken together makes Babbling Book a much superior card. Also a much a happier looking guy. Like this is this weird, I don't know, he's kind of got this bizarre little like cloud grin or something, but he's not nearly as happy as Babbling Book. This is an elemental, which does matter, but I think that many decks, especially if they're using the new Mage Quest, are potentially likely to want both of them because you need to get lots of various sources of cards from outside the game in order to trigger the Mage Quest to get your time warps. So we'll very likely see both of those cards in the same deck. We may see this in a Mage Elemental deck that won't include Babbling Book, but overall I think Babbling Book is the stronger card in a vacuum, but thankfully we don't live in a vacuum, and there's much more interesting things that matter like the Elemental tag, so we'll see. So Seam Surger, 4-cost, 5/4. Battlecry, if you played an Elemental last turn, add a Flame Geyser to your hand. Flame Geyser, of course, is the 2-cost mage spell that deals 2 damage and puts a 1/2 Elemental in your hand. So it is an Elemental that requires Elemental synergy and then helps turn on your other Elemental synergies, which is very valuable if you're playing a deck that has a lot of cards that key off of Elemental effects. It's also just a reasonably high value card because you get removal along with it. It's not nearly as powerful a tempo card because obviously you're just getting the 5/4 body for 4 immediately, and then need to spend the mana later on to actually get your Flame Geyser effect. So it'll be interesting to see how this lines up with sort of the more tempo-oriented elementals. But I think that having a 4-cost elemental to pair with the 3/5 Divine Shield taunt guy means that you have sort of a lot of incentive to play like 3-cost elementals like maybe Tar Creeper, or other things that enable you to be sure that you're going to have this key elemental trigger on turn 4. But this can actually give you, the Flame Geyser, which gives you the 1/2, which can then trigger either your 3/5 later. It's just Elementalception. Air Elemental! So Air Elemental, this is a card that we saw in, I think it was the final game of the Shaman deck versus the Mage deck in the reveal stream. And this card, I think, is actually quite powerful in a lot of situations. It's obviously not a good minion if you're fighting against decks that have a lot of cheap ways to kill it, like, say, Patches or Rusty Hook from the Zoth's First Mate. But it's very powerful against decks that are relying on spells or hero powers to generally kill minions. For instance, this is a super powerful card against, say, Reno Mage. Obviously Reno is going to be going away in the new expansion. As far as Standard is concerned, it'll be exclusive to Wild. But there likely will be decks that are still pretty similar in terms of structure, like being a spell-based mage deck. For instance, we saw the Mage Quest as well. So we will see decks where this is a very, very strong minion. If Pirate Warrior remains an extremely popular deck, then this is likely to be oppressed by those as an early minion that doesn't really stand up well against those sort of minion decks. But I think this is a powerful card in the right context, and the fact that it's an elemental means it'll see play in decks simply because of that. This can get a lot of damage in very early against spell-based decks. Very powerful card. Next up we have Fire Plume Harbinger, a 2-cost 1/1 with Battlecry. Reduce the cost of elementals in your hand by 1. Pretty strong card. Your elemental curve can obviously start much sooner in terms of getting your big elemental minions out and such. Anything that reduces the cost of things is pretty powerful. Shaman's a class that has a lot of powerful elementals between the Stone Sentinel and Kalamos that you can curve into, and it's really, really high impact if you're able to play them ahead of time. be able to say, you know, Stone Sentinel on 6 or Calamos on 7, or do both of those because it's a persistent reduction on all of those if they're in your hand at the time, can really, really help you curve out very quickly and do a lot of damage to your opponent's board in the case of Calamos, or just to keep you alive in the case of Stone Sentinel. Hot Spring Guardian, 2/4 taunt for 3 with Battlecry, restore 3 health. Amusingly, Ben Brode said on the stream that this would not be good in Aggro Shaman. I'm not sure I agree with him. Maybe it's not good in like Aggro Shaman as in like just rush you down Aggro Shaman, but this is definitely a powerful card in any kind of deck that is looking to defend minions from opposing weapons or opposing minions. Even if it is, you know, a 2/4, you know, that's restoring health, it can restore health to your minions. It can restore health to your face after you punch their guy. It's like not as good as like a Feral Spirits at just protecting your minions, because Feral Spirits gives you 2 taunts. Obviously, Totem Golem is going to be moving out of Standard and into Wild, but if you had this to like restore health to your Totem Golem after you kill your opponent's minion, it's very good at protecting, you know, your Tunnel Trog along with it. So, you know, this is definitely the sort of card that can be very strong in a mid-rangey aggressive style of deck, but not a rush you down aggro deck. And overall, it's just a great card, period. I mean, this is a ton of stats and value for a single card. Being able to get a 4 health taunt minion for 3 is like pretty reasonable to begin with, and adding the restore 3 health onto it. Like I actually was playing Squirming Tentacle in Handbuff Paladin for a while before I ultimately ended up cutting it. But the 2/4 taunt against a lot of decks is actually pretty meaningful, and adding the restore 3 health to that is definitely making it powerful enough to play against any kind of aggressive decks, and reasonable enough in mid-range strategies as well. So very strong card. I think I'll see a lot of play. This is a card that was even from like a week ago that I somehow missed and didn't actually include in my review before. Spirit Echo, which is give your minions Death Rattle, return this to your hand. So this is a pretty interesting card. Obviously works particularly well with minions that have some sort of Battlecry effect, or even a Death Rattle effect, frankly. Like being able to get, you know, multiple uses out of a lot of powerful minions can be pretty strong. It's not clear how you use this, which is one of the things that's so interesting about it to me. That, you know, it's like, okay, well, what minions do you want to possibly get multiple uses out of? It's kind of like an Echo of Medivh, that you don't immediately get the cards. You need to actually play the Spirit Echo, you know, have the guys in play, Spirit Echo, run them in, get them again. I mean, it makes sense that it costs less than Echo Medivh because it's weaker than Echo Medivh, but overall, like, it's a cool card to explore. Not sure what you do with it, but definitely looking forward to experimenting with it. Next we have Tidal Surge, which is a Shaman spell. Deal 4 damage to a minion, restore 4 health to your hero. So it's funny, like I've actually found myself looking to try and play like a more control-oriented Shaman deck, but still ended up playing stuff like, you know, Lightning Bolt or Lava Burst or Jade Lightning, simply because that's just what's available. And Tidal Surge gives you another tool that you can use to play a more control-oriented Shaman deck that can keep you alive while you're killing your opponent's minions. It's not clear that you're going to want to play a control-oriented Shaman deck that necessarily is going to be better than Jade, but say you're playing something like the Ancestral Spirit Shaman, or you're playing like the Madame Goya style Shaman decks that are going around right now, which are just trying to play a very long game and keep themselves alive, kill their opponent's stuff. This is definitely a card that has a very real home in that style of deck. So I expect this to be a key element of some of those decks moving forward. Compare this to Holy Fire. It does 1 less damage, heals you for 1 less than Holy Fire, and costs 2 less mana. That's how you cost a Shaman card. You just make it cost 2 less than their class's version, and then there you go. It's a Shaman card. All right. Well, the actual final card is Primalfin Totem. This is a new Shaman Totem, a 0/3 for 2. At the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 Murloc. I have no idea what to think about this. I am seeing it for the first time right now. And yeah, I mean, guaranteed you're getting a 1/1 Murloc because you get the summon at the end of your turn. It's kind of like a Mana Tide Totem, where you get the value immediately, even if your opponent removes it immediately. If your opponent doesn't have the ability to easily clear this, has to like spend a card clearing this rather than like a weapon charge or some of their board, this can be quite powerful. If they can't kill it, it can kind of get out of hand, giving you a bunch of Murlocs. My guess is that it's not going to be very good because very likely to be playing against lots of decks that can clear it fairly readily early on. And you'd rather be using your early turns to actually play cards that either protect your own early minions or are playing early minions yourselves. So not really looking like a particularly strong card, but You know, who knows? Maybe we can just summon gigantic swarms of Murlocs off of our totems, and our opponents will just get absolutely crushed.